The return of Russell T Davies as Doctor Who showrunner was a pleasant surprise, but he did not return alone. Not only are we witnessing a full-on RTD2, but we've also witnessed something else that we never thought we'd see. The return of Steven Moffat. Serving as a guest writer during RTD1 before taking the mantle as showrunner between 2010 and 2017, he is responsible for many a child's nightmares and many an adult's tears, as well as some of the most complex and wibbly-wobbly plot lines the show has ever seen. So with his grand return to the Whoniverse continuing and maybe possibly ending with the 2024 Christmas special Joy to the World, now feels like the perfect time to revisit his Doctor Who CV and rank all of his episodes from worst to best. So buckle in, folks, this is gonna be a long one. Starting with a bonus mention for The Curse of Fatal Death and Time Crash. Before we get into the proper Doctor Who episodes, let us not forget two other projects that came from the mind of Steven Moffat. So firstly, there's his maiden voyage into the franchise, which is 1999's comic relief sketch The Curse of Fatal Death. Although a parody rather than a serious Doctor Who story, it still showcased Moffat's ability to write for the Doctor and his knowledge of the show's lore. Yes, he is poking fun at all that stuff, but it never feels mean-spirited, and you can tell that he absolutely loves it, which makes it very enjoyable to watch. Moffat then penned another charity sketch in the form of 2007's Time Crash. Now, this minisode saw the 10th and 5th Doctors cross paths in the TARDIS, and once again it showcased Moffat's extensive knowledge and love of Doctor Who, making playful references to the Mara, Nyssa and Tegan, among many other things as well. It's basically an excuse for Moffat and David Tennant to geek out with a favourite classic Doctor of his, and once again, that passion permeates the screen. Both these specials are such good fun, and though for obvious reasons they aren't included in the main ranking, they are significant contributions from Moffat, and they did deserve to be mentioned. So now let's get into the actual ranking. Number 42, The Caretaker. Co-written with Gareth Roberts, The Caretaker approaches the inevitable companion has a life beyond the TARDIS scenario. And while it makes sense for the Doctor to feel a little bit jealous or even a bit protective over Clara as she explores a new relationship with Danny, 12's overly aggressive and rude behaviour towards him actually harms the episode. The usual balance is rocked by the fact that viewers feel more inclined to side with the stranger rather than our familiar hero. Pair this with the fact that the alien element of the episode comes secondary to the relationship drama, and then when it does come, it looks more like a toy robot from a mid-2000s Argos catalogue, and The Caretaker just doesn't hold up as one of Steven Moffat's finest offerings. And don't kid yourself, you probably had forgotten that he had a writing credit for this one, didn't you? Don't lie, I know you did. Number 41, Into the Dalek. Another co-written episode, this time with Phil Ford. Into the Dalek gets lost in the fold of all the great Dalek stories that have been released over the past 61 years. The concept of being miniaturized and placed inside a Dalek's body is certainly an intriguing one, but this episode just felt as though it used too many ideas from other episodes, but not as well. The miniaturization concept, for example, was used in Moffat's own Let's Kill Hitler, as was the premise of antibodies attacking foreign bodies. The Doctor using his own memories to attack a monster was achieved far more poignantly in The Rings of Akaten, and most obviously, the idea of a Dalek developing emotions and a conscience was explored far better in the series' one-episode Dalek. Now, while it's always great to see the Daleks appear in Doctor Who, the fact that they're so iconic does mean that there's a lot more pressure on these stories to be standouts. And unfortunately, Into the Dalek just felt a bit too derivative for me, and not very memorable either. Number 40, Time Heist. Yet another co-written episode here. There is definitely a theme going on, have you noticed? Time Heist is a perfectly fine episode, but that's really the strongest feeling I can muster about it. The heist setup certainly provides some entertaining Bond-like moments, and framing our usual heroes as criminals for the bulk of the story was a nice subversion, but all in all, this felt very much like a filler episode. I will say it is fun looking back on this one though and spotting a pre-Wicked, even a pre-Bridgerton appearance from Jonathan Bailey in the role of Psy. It's always great to just see future stars making pre-fame appearances in this wacky little sci-fi show, and Psy is certainly the standout character in the supporting ensemble of this episode. Number 39, The Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe. The Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe is by no means a bad episode. In fact, none of Stephen Moffat's episodes are total flops. Even the ones at the bottom of this list still have highlights. But when it comes to the Christmas specials, the 2011 offering had the misfortune of being incredibly forgettable compared to previous and following years. Despite featuring some great guest stars including Claire Skinner, Alexander Armstrong and Bill Bailey, and an overall feel-good message about the strength and power of mothers, the story is far too slow in getting to the point, and it's a touch too melodramatic for its own good, even for your typical overly sentimental Christmas special. Number 38, The Girl Who Died. Back to the co-writes, and this one is penned by Moffat and the extremely talented Jamie Matheson, who also wrote Flatline and Mummy on the Orient Express. This one should have been so much better than it was. The Girl Who Died is most remembered for the introduction of Maisie Williams as Shielder. And beyond that, while a fairly entertaining episode, it doesn't stick in the mind in the grand tapestry of Moffat offerings. It is somewhat significant in Doctor Who history, however, with the satisfying in-universe explanation behind 12 having the same face as Caecilius from Series 4's The Fires of Pompeii. Now, whether it was necessary to address the recasting of Peter Capaldi or not remains up for debate, but it did allow for a great performance from Capaldi and provide a strong catalyst for a wider plot to develop with Ashildr. Oh, and you know, the Vikings were pretty cool as well. Number 37, The Bells of St. John. An episode revolving around the power of the internet and its ever-growing control over the human race could have been a thoughtful and timely story about the dangers of technology, especially back in 2013 when The Bells of St. John first aired. But frustratingly, Moffat doesn't seem interested in any of that, with a surprisingly bare-bones story that doesn't really have anything to say. The mystery surrounding the multiple Claras keeps ticking away and is intriguing enough, but the episode itself is rather forgettable, and the Spoonheads are underwhelming villains. Points for the Doctor riding a motorbike up the Shard though, and the great if slightly wasted casting of Celia Imrie as the Great Intelligence's puppet. I love Celia Imrie. Number 36, The Name of the Doctor. The Name of the Doctor had a lot of promise and managed to both deliver and disappoint at the same time. The resolution to the mystery of Clara is satisfying, if slightly problematic for the show's continuity, and it's always great to see River Song return, of course, but the high stakes of the Doctor's name being revealed never felt realistic when it was clear that the show was never going to actually answer that question. Now, I must of course mention that hilarious final moment between the Doctor and River and the end of River's chronological story. I think it was a really clever way to allow us to see more of a post-library River without compromising the emotion or finality of her sacrifice in Forest of the Dead. As for the reveal of John Hurt as the War Doctor, it was genuinely shocking at the time and still remains powerful today. It's just a shame that it wasn't attached to a more remarkable episode. Number 35, The Return of Dr. Mysterio. So unlike most Doctor Who Christmas specials, The Return of Dr. Mysterio steps away from an inherently festive setting, but it still provides a fun outing for Christmas Day. Though it feels more trite today than it did on release, the idea of a Doctor Who episode centered around a superhero immediately sparked intrigue back in 2016, before superhero saturation truly set in. And the result is an enjoyable sci-fi spin on a genre that was ruling the box office at the time. Now, with the MCU in full swing, Moffat was actually really smart to cash in on the popularity of superhero stories while dialing up the Who-ness and putting it on telly at the biggest time of the year. Well done, Moffat, very clever. Number 34, Joy to the World. Stephen Moffat's latest outing certainly has its moments to shine, but overall it doesn't quite reach the heights of many of his other episodes. The concept of the Time Hotel is absolutely brilliant, and the idea of using the hotel rooms to microwave the starseed is one of those clever timey-wimey twists that we've come to expect from Moffat by now. But the standout moment isn't time hotels, starseeds, dinosaurs, or even Nicola Coughlan surprisingly being underused as the big guest star. It's the year that the Doctor stays behind in order to complete the loop. The chemistry between Ncuti Gatwa and Steph de Worley as Anita is wonderful, and the developing relationship between the characters makes their final goodbye so much more heartbreaking. It's a solid enough Christmas special, but far from Moffat's greatest festive offering. And for my full in-depth thoughts, you can check out my Ups and Downs review, which is on the channel now. Number 33, Deep Breath. It's always interesting to see how new incarnations respond to regeneration. Some, like 11, spring straight into action and relish in discovering their new personality, while others, like 10 and 12, seem to require a little bit more cooking time and pass out shortly after changing. And it's the Doctor wrestling with his new face that makes Deep Breath a gripping debut story for Peter Capaldi's Time Lord. 12 is entirely different to 11. And while that is a good thing, it is quite jarring at first, so it was smart of Moffat to make the Doctor feel jarred as well, with a touching cameo from Matt Smith to plead with Clara, and then by extension the audience, to give this new Doctor a chance. Throw in a T-Rex standing in the middle of Victorian London, the welcome return of the Paternoster Gang, the first appearance of Missy, and Moffat's pleasant knack for referencing previous stories with the return of the Clockwork droids, and while I clearly don't think Deep Breath is one of Moffat's greatest, I do enjoy quite a lot about it. Number 32, Extremis. This is exactly the type of Doctor Who I want to see more of. The design of the monk creatures is absolutely horrific and gives some great fuel to my belief that Doctor Who can and should be dark and scary. It's an intriguing and gripping story with its unexpected twist and dark examination of the nature of existence. The Missy subplot doesn't always click neatly with the main part of the story, but it's always great to see Michelle Gomez, so really no complaints. Number 31, The Pilot. Following the events of Clara's departure and the final farewell to River Song, the pilot comes as a breath of fresh air for the 12th Doctor. The introduction of Bill and the more laid-back relationship between her and the Doctor is a welcome change of dynamic after the darker and more serious relationship that he shared with Clara. The best Doctor-companion relationships are those that have a good balance of humour and drama, much like 10 and Donna. And this one certainly feels like the right change for 12's journey, from gruff grandad to cool space wizard. And bonus points for the photos of River and Susan on the Doctor's desk. But mainly the River one. Number 30, The Snowmen. Evil snowmen. I mean, what could be more fitting for a monster in a Doctor Who Christmas special? Following the heartbreaking departure of Amy and Rory, The Snowmen does a really good job of exploring the effect of this loss on the Doctor. It makes a real change to see the usually upbeat hero wallowing and broken, especially in a Christmas special. So much for festive cheer. In true Moffat fashion, this episode also starts to unfold more of the overall story arc for the upcoming series with the reintroduction of another Clara variant, as well as teasing the return of a monster from the classic era, the Great Intelligence. And the duo of Sir Ian McKellen and Richard E. Grant as the big bad is perfect casting. And who could forget that amazing shot of Victorian Clara walking into the TARDIS on a cloud? I certainly couldn't. It's the most memorable part of the episode. Number 29, The Pyramid at the End of the World. Co-written with Peter Harness, The Pyramid at the End of the World is an episode that, if I'm honest, I didn't fully appreciate back in 2017. But on reflection, it clicked with me a lot more. The significance of the pyramid's location and the poignant discussions that were being held between the various representatives are deeply fascinating and thought-provoking. But to me, as a younger viewer, it was a rather dialogue-heavy and confusing plot to understand. In hindsight, though, this is a very strong episode and demonstrates that signature style of Stephen Moffat's writing where seemingly unrelated threads are slowly pulled together to reveal an elaborate plot with plenty of twists and scares along the way. Number 28, The Magician's Apprentice and the Witch's Familiar. The Magician's Apprentice and the Witch's Familiar revisits the question that was posited by the 4th Doctor in Genesis of the Daleks. Do I have the right? But instead of the entire Dalek race at the Doctor's mercy, this time it's a young Davros. Seeing the creator of the most evil creatures in the universe as a scared boy on a battlefield brought a fascinating dimension to the character, and to his relationship with the Doctor as well. It's quite talky for a series opener, but there's some thought-provoking stuff in there, along with a great performance from Julian Bleach as Davros, some typically witty Moffat one-liners, and the energetic chaos of Michelle Gomez's Missy. The only downside is the unfortunate introduction of the 12th Doctor's ridiculous sonic sunglasses. But that's a topic for another time, let's not get into that now. Number 27, Hellbent. The conclusion of the 3-part farewell to Clara, Hellbent puts a spin on the usual companion departure by having the Doctor lose his memories rather than Clara. If I'm honest, the return of the Time Lords leaves something to be desired, but the overall ploy that 12 devises to use them to his advantage is a clever one. Another example of how Stephen Moffat consistently thinks outside the box. It's also nice to see the Doctor return to that barn on Gallifrey and to just explore his home planet a little bit more. The cloisters and the sliders are creepy additions that made for some strong world building. Jenna Coleman gives a moving final performance too, although if I'm honest, I'm still far from Clara's biggest fan. I'm sorry, there, I said it. Number 26, Listen. Stephen Moffat just has a knack for putting sci-fi spins on common fears, and Listen is another one to add to that list. We've all had the fear that something is hiding under the bed. I mean, some of us still refuse to swing our legs over the side, or leave our limbs dangling outside the duvet. And this episode fuels that fear even further, but it also tells us that the fear makes us stronger. This focus on fear makes it a rare episode exploring the vulnerabilities of the Doctor, which gives it an unsettling feeling throughout. The perfect story for Capaldi's more delirious incarnation. It's gripping and highly atmospheric, though for me, not quite special enough to bump higher on the list. But undoubtedly one of the strongest episodes in the Series 8 lineup, that's for sure. Number 25, Twice Upon a Time. As fans, we often point out the changes and developments of Doctor Who over the years, and Twice Upon a Time does a brilliant job of highlighting those differences through the meeting and interaction of the very first and the very latest incarnations of the Doctor. The banter between Peter Capaldi and David Bradley is top-notch, and the more serious moments between the characters work very well as well. Very well as well. This episode not only marked the end of Capaldi and Moffat's Doctor Who journey, but it also marked the end of Murray Gold. Or so we thought. And as such, Twice Upon a Time is rife with some of his greatest compositions for Doctor Who, all vamped up for his final bow. It is a treat for the ears, underscoring those powerful final sequences as 12 lets go and embraces his next incarnation. Actually, while we're here, please release the Series 10 soundtrack. Thanks. Number 24, Dark Water and Death in Heaven. Now, for my money, Doctor Who works better with a more serious tone. That said, Dark Water and Death in Heaven arguably verges on going maybe too far into the morbid territory. Controversial cremation lore aside though, this story is all about Michelle Gomez, who steals the show in her first major outing as Missy. Without her, this story would be ranked a lot lower than it is. But her sadistic charm just brings that humour into the fold and softens what would otherwise be quite a bleak and frankly far less enjoyable affair. It also stands as Danny Pink's best story, giving him his strongest material in the episode that marks his departure from the show, barring Last Christmas, of course. It's not enough to salvage the character, if I'm honest, but his death storyline and how that drives Clara was an unexpected yet interesting way to close the book. Number 23, The Zygon Inversion. Quite why Moffat only co-wrote one half of a two-part story is anyone's guess. Yep, here we are with the Zygon Invasion and the Zygon Inversion, 3/4 of which was written by Peter Harness. Inversion, though, is the better of the two episodes, and that's mostly down to Peter Capaldi, who acts his little socks off with a poignant and sadly ever-relevant speech about the futility of war. It's delivered with unparalleled intensity and integrity by Capaldi, and stands as one of his finest moments as the Doctor. And credit to the writers too. The commentary on warfare and the pointlessness of weapons in procuring peace is expertly woven into the story in the form of the Osgood boxes. And it just leaves you with a lot more to chew on than your average Doctor Who episode. Number 22, The Girl in the Fireplace. Now, many might object to this mid-table placement of The Girl in the Fireplace, but while there are definitely some standout moments, the episode does have its flaws. The Clockwork Droids are fabulous Doctor Who monsters with their creepy masked faces and bladed hands, and the episode looks and feels the part across the board, with some lush costumes and gorgeous sets, so top marks for production design. But the central romance doesn't quite work for me. While it does make sense for Renette to have developed feelings for the Doctor throughout her life, for the Doctor himself, it's only been a matter of hours, and so the level of emotional connection by the episode's end just seems a little bit unusual. Now, Mr. Sean Ferrick loves this episode, so hopefully he doesn't see this list. Number 21, Last Christmas. Doctor Who meets Alien meets Inception. I mean, what more can I say? This one is an absolute winner. A solid Christmas offering. Number 20, Asylum of the Daleks. Opening Series 7 with the Ponds on the verge of divorce was certainly not what fans were expecting when they tuned into Asylum of the Daleks. But that wasn't even the biggest surprise in the episode. It had already been announced that Jenna Coleman would be the next companion following the departure of Amy and Rory. But what we didn't know was that she'd appear before that departure actually happened. It was an amazing rug pull from Moffat. Not only was the next companion introduced earlier than expected, but she was seemingly killed off before she'd even fulfilled that role. Now, another interesting element to this episode was the choice to show a weakness in the Daleks. It's refreshing to see the Pepper Potts from a different perspective and explore a vulnerable side to them in the form of the insane Daleks and the fear that the other Daleks have for them. So while I'm lower on my placement of the girl in the fireplace than most people might be, I'm definitely much higher on Asylum of the Daleks. For me though, it's pretty good. Number 19, Let's Kill Hitler. After the big reveal of River's identity at the end of A Good Man Goes to War, viewers were left with even more questions. And so it was wonderful to open the second part of Series 6 with an episode that filled in a big piece of the Melody Pond puzzle. With the title Let's Kill Hitler though, it was assumed that this episode wouldn't be as focused on the Melody mystery as we'd hoped. But the focus is drawn away from Hitler very early on and directed towards the greater arcs of the series. Some view this as a flaw, that the episode doesn't deliver on the promise of its title. And sure, yeah, okay, maybe the title did paint the wrong picture, but you can't deny it was the right move to give us immediate answers about Melody and her history. It's wonderful to see Alex Kingston here playing a younger, more naive version of River's song. A version devoid of the influence and relationship later established with the Doctor. And she's clearly having a lot of fun with the role right here in this episode. It's a very funny episode across the board as well, and the comedic moments of Amy and Rory's deeper realization of who their best friend has always been is just brilliant. Fans were probably expecting something a bit more dramatic, having waited a couple of months after A Good Man Goes to War, with Revived Who taking its first mid-series break between June and August 2011. But divorced from those expectations, Let's Kill Hitler is a much better episode than it gets credit for. Number 18, Boom. After 7 years away, Stephen Moffat's grand return to the Whoniverse is a standout episode of Ncuti Gatwa's first full season. Boom has all the elements that make for a perfect Doctor Who episode. High stakes, thematically rich, emotional, but also comedic and light-hearted at times too. The single setting could have resulted in a static, boring story, and yet this only serves to heighten the tension and the mavity of the situation. It genuinely feels like the Doctor is in danger, like the Doctor is out of his depth, which isn't easy to pull off. Add in some brilliantly snappy Moffat dialogue, and you've got one of the best episodes of Season 1, and one that rests comfortably towards the upper end of the Moffat pantheon. Number 17, The Wedding of River's Song. For many fans, The Wedding of River Song would rank much lower on this list, but I think it's a highly underrated episode. The concept of the past, present and future all happening at once is a beautifully bonkers Doctor Who idea, and the madness of Charles Dickens on TV and Winston Churchill as a Roman emperor with a Silurian doctor lets you know what you're in for out of the gate. The title may be the ultimate spoiler, but The Wedding of River Song also serves to answer the question of who River is to the Doctor, much to Amy and Rory's shock. That long-awaited wedding sequence is just pure magic, and like the other big emotional beats in this episode, it works really well. Number 16, The Beast Below. After the whimsical feel of the first episode of Series 5, the second episode, The Beast Below, took on a much darker tone. This episode immediately proved that Stephen Moffat and Matt Smith were capable of delivering a wide range of stories for this new era of Doctor Who, with a fascinating far future mystery set aboard a starship version of the UK. Minus Scotland, of course. It's a terrific setting for a powerful story, affording the 11th Doctor yet another defining moment right at the beginning of his journey, with his "Nobody human has anything to say to me today." Ooh. And anyone who didn't cry for the star whale, well, you're a Cyberman. Number 15, The Time of the Doctor. One of the strengths of the Moffat era is the long-term storytelling, with various arcs and loose ends sometimes not being tied up until years after the fact. And as a regular viewer, it's hugely exciting to be drip-fed clues and mysteries over several series. But it's really only worth it if the payoff sticks the landing, and that's exactly what The Time of the Doctor does. More so than any other, the 11th Doctor's era feels like a continuous story, and his final episode closes that journey in a really satisfying way. The explanation behind the silence, the origins of the question, and the significance of the cracks in time all highlight how much thought Moffat put into all three of Matt Smith's series, culminating in a true Christmas cracker of a finale. There's a real sense that an epic fairy tale is ending as 11 battles for centuries to defend the people of Trenzalore. And Moffat and Murray Gold don't half make the most of the opportunity to tug on the old heartstrings with musical callbacks like 4 Knocks and a surprise Karen Gillan cameo. Number 14, The Husbands of River Song. Speaking of satisfying finales, River Song is another character who Moffat closed off, for now, in such a great way. The dynamic between Alex Kingston and Peter Capaldi is so different to that of Kingston and Matt Smith, and yet the chemistry and connection between the characters remains really strong. It's arguably their most natural bond, with their relationship becoming more mature than it was with previous Doctors, and yet no less fun. To turn the tables and then have River not recognise the Doctor was also a really great way to keep their storyline fresh, while also adhering to the established guidelines of their wibbly-wobbly timeline. And that final scene in front of the Singing Towers of Darillium is such an emotional rollercoaster. And God bless Moffat for leaving us a little 24-year-sized loophole so that River Song can still make a grand return in the future. Here's hoping. Please. Number 13, The Angels Take Manhattan. Is the Statue of Liberty as a giant weeping angel maybe a step too far? Yes. Do we let that ruin an otherwise gripping and emotional farewell to our beloved Amy and Rory? Absolutely not! Stephen Moffat knew exactly how to get us all sobbing into our jammy dodgers with The Angels Take Manhattan, especially with that paradox bait and switch leading us into a false sense of security right up until it was too late. God damn you, Moffat! It's all calculated to wring as many tears out of you as possible, and gosh darn it, it succeeds. So many twists, so many turns, so many quips, and River Song. Moffat Who at its very best. Number 12, The Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone. The return of River Song, the return of the Weeping Angels, a giant crack in space and time eating people alive? This was the moment that Moffat said, I'm in charge now. With the exception of that naff sequence where the Weeping Angels start moving, this story succeeds in making the lonely assassins even more terrifying and evil than before, especially with them snapping necks, yikes, and the decision to have them communicate using the disembodied voice of their latest victim, Bob. Poor Bob. It's an action-packed and highly entertaining first two-parter for Matt Smith and Karen Gillan that succeeds not only as a thrilling standalone Weeping Angel story, but also as an integral part of the overall series arc. Number 11, A Good Man Goes to War. Despite being labelled as too messy and difficult to follow by some fans, Series 6 is where Moffat excels in weaving together multiple threads in a grand tapestry, and A Good Man Goes to War is the best part of that journey. Though the birth of Melody Pond followed by River proclaiming the day to be her birthday sort of gave the game away early, the end reveal of River's identity is still a big soap opera shocker of a cliffhanger that smartly left several questions open for the second half of the series. Who says Russell T Davies does family drama better than Moffat? I challenge whoever says that. Matt Smith also gives an exceptionally good performance in this episode, especially in his Colonel Runaway speech, and as always, Murray Gold's music gets an up from me. Throw in a couple of whiz-bang action sequences and A Good Man Goes to War is a 5-star blockbuster banger. Number 10, The Pandorica Opens and The Big Bang. You could make an argument for several of the episodes in my top 20 to make it into the top 10. Such is the strength of Moffat's back catalogue. But we start the actual top 10 here with the fantastic The Pandorica Opens and The Big Bang, where the threads dropped throughout Matt Smith's debut series all weave together to reveal the nature of the mysterious cracks in time. The twist that the Doctor himself is the most feared creature in the universe just makes so much sense, actually to the point where it's laughable that few saw it coming. But what a twist it was. To have all the creatures who fear the Doctor gather in unity to defeat their greatest foe made the universe-ending stakes feel very, very real. In Doctor Who, we're constantly told that the universe is at risk, so to actually see it blow up was a true wow moment. The Big Bang follows up with some of Moffat's finest time travel plotting, and Matt Smith at the top of his game with his gotcha farewell to Amy and his final bedtime story. Not to mention his iconic Stonehenge speech in the previous episode. A perfect end to a near-perfect series, and easily one of Moffat's best series finales. Number 9, The Day of the Doctor. The 50th anniversary special is a masterpiece. Moffat delivers the perfect balance of homage, celebration, and new adventure in an epic, feature-length extravaganza. The choice to bring back David Tennant while also introducing a new, forgotten incarnation worked so well, and it created a multi-Doctor story that didn't feel forced or convoluted, as is always the risk with these things. Exploring the Time War was also the perfect way to bridge the gap between classic and new Who, giving this episode a true purpose rather than just being throwaway fluff. And the surprise cameo from Tom Baker, I mean, having him set the show off on its next 50 years was such a special moment. The fact that Moffat managed to deliver this huge anniversary special and serve as showrunner for both Doctor Who and Sherlock simultaneously, well, that's nothing short of remarkable. Seriously, the man must have bathed in coffee at that point in time. Also, as with Joy to the World, if you want my full in-depth thoughts on this episode, then you can check out my first retro ups and downs, which is also available on the channel. Number 8, The 11th Hour. Stephen Moffat and Matt Smith had major shoes to fill coming into Series 5, and The 11th Hour was under a lot of pressure to convince audiences that Doctor Who was still in safe hands. It absolutely succeeded. The shift in tone from the darker drama of David Tennant's final episodes to a more enchanting, playful vibe worked incredibly well, and proved that, just like the classic series, the modern series could undergo significant changes both in front of and behind the camera, and continue to thrive. And the decision to introduce the 11th Doctor through the big bright eyes of young Amelia Pond instantly gave viewers a similar sense of wonder and awe for this new incarnation. It accomplished the most important job of a post-regeneration episode, to get audiences on board with the new Doctor, and it did it in record time. And the rest of the episode isn't half bad too. Number 7, Heaven Sent. Heaven Sent is quite unlike anything Doctor Who has done before or since. We've had Doctor Light stories, we've had Companion Light stories, we've even had TARDIS Light stories. But this episode strips everything back so that the Doctor is completely alone. Well, almost, for the majority of the runtime. The Groundhog Day structure is such a perfect Doctor Who device that it's actually bizarre that it's never been done before. Accompanied by Murray Gold's sensational piece The Shepherd's Boy, Peter Capaldi delivers his magnum opus performance, while Stephen Moffat's script lays out all the puzzle pieces at just the right times and at just the right cadence to keep you hooked. The thing is, when a show has been running for as long as this one has, it's really important to experiment with new ideas and take a few risks. And Heaven Sent stands not only as a monument to Stephen Moffat's brilliance as a writer, but also as a display of the heights Doctor Who can reach when it's firing on all cylinders. Number 6, The Impossible Astronaut and Day of the Moon. This is how to open a new series. It's hard to think of a better way to keep people engaged for the next 13 weeks than by killing off the main character in episode 1. The Impossible Astronaut and Day of the Moon does exactly this and has you instantly gripped. The Silents are some of the scariest creatures in Doctor Who, and the concept of them disappearing from your memory when you look away is an incredibly chilling idea. Moffat was never going to top the Weeping Angels, but he came pretty close here with the Silents. This is also the best story for Eleven, River and the Ponds, with the gang getting some of their most entertaining banter and bickering. And for the first time, it gave a real sense that they're a proper team rather than on and off TARDIS buddies. Number 5, World Enough and Time and the Doctor Falls. World Enough and Time and the Doctor Falls has all the requirements for the perfect Doctor Who story. High stakes, tension, mystery, surprises, sacrifice, and a healthy dash of humour as well. The return of John Sim, despite being the worst kept secret in Doctor Who history, and the team up of the Saxon Master and Missy is such a treat. The pair just bounce off of each other so well, and they're a joy to watch as they taunt the Doctor and belittle his efforts to stop the Cybermen. Elsewhere, Moffat and Capaldi are on top speechy form yet again, with another cracker of a monologue for 12 about saving lives being an act of kindness rather than being about winning or victory. Moffat encapsulates what the Doctor is all about in just a few taps of the keyboard, and it's delivered so well that even Murray Gold turns the music right down. It's the greatest finale Moffat ever wrote, which is no easy feat considering the competition. Number 4, A Christmas Carol. A Christmas Carol is by far Stephen Moffat's greatest Christmas special, perhaps even the greatest Christmas special in the history of Doctor Who. From the smart Doctor Who twist on the classic Charles Dickens story, to the phenomenal performance by Sir Michael Gambon, to Catherine Jenkins' beautiful singing voice, it's just so Christmassy and lovely and clever from start to finish. And there's a real sense that you're watching something special. As Russell T Davies recently observed, it's also an excellent piece of drama, exemplified by the moment where a young Kazran has a vision of his own future, quite literally. Moffat at Christmas doesn't get better than this episode right here. Number 3, Blink. Following the disappointment of Love and Monsters, the next Doctor Light episode had a lot to prove, and it's fair to say that Stephen Moffat knocked it out of the park. Doctor Who is at its best when it's scary, and Blink is very scary. The Weeping Angels are some of the most frightening and unique aliens in modern fiction, and experiencing their terror through the eyes of Sally and Larry, rather than the ever-confident Doctor, just elevates that fear factor even more. Carey Mulligan carries the episode so effortlessly that it's actually barely even noticeable that our main characters are absent. It's no wonder she was offered the chance to become a regular companion. Along with the scares, there's also a strange beauty to the episode. The rickety old house, Billy's life washing away in the span of a single rainstorm, Murray Gold's unusual and underrated soundscape, and the majesty of the angels themselves. The idea of being pulled back in time and living your life separated from everything and everyone you know and love is so cruel, but as the Doctor observes, it's also somewhat kind. The only psychopaths in the universe to kill you nicely. This fusion of horror and melancholy is utterly mesmerising and stands Blink as one of the finest hours in the history of Doctor Who. Number 2, The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances. So you might notice a bit of a theme with the top 3 here. As I just mentioned, Doctor Who is at its best when it's scary, and Moffat set the spooky bar pretty high right at the beginning of his Whoniverse journey. The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances are responsible for an entire generation of British children being traumatised by the sight of a gas mask. Moffat immediately demonstrates his knack for cooking up unique, layered and memorable baddies, managing to deliver the most traumatising of monsters, while also telling a story of kindness and love and the need for nurture. This story also introduced Captain Jack Harkness, who livens up any episode that he appears in. It ticks every box for what makes an ideal Doctor Who story. And number 1, Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead. From the nightmarish premise of the Vashta Narada to the darkly comedic ice cream and hey, who turned out the lights, to the introduction of a certain time-travelling archaeologist, Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead has it all. Tennant and Tate are at the top of their game, at one moment providing the iconic banter between the Doctor and Donna, and the next delivering some of the most emotionally vulnerable moments we've ever seen from the pair. Now in hindsight, this story was just the tip of the iceberg in the grand tapestry of River Song. But even looking at the episodes without this foresight, the instant chemistry and change in dynamic between River and the Doctor was such a unique angle for Doctor Who. And the tragedy felt by both the Doctor and the audience at seemingly never getting to learn more about this mysterious character hit incredibly deep. It's a display of Stephen Moffat's strength as a writer. Great scares, complex relationships, quotable dialogue, and of course, a healthy dose of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. No notes. This is, in my view, peak Doctor Who. And now we can celebrate that I managed to get through this mammoth task. I hope you don't mind me going to give myself a pat on the back. This was a very, very long time in the making. Do let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on this ranking and what your ranking would be. In the meantime, I've been Ellie for Who Culture, and in the words of River Song herself, goodbye, sweeties.